My billionaire grandfather left me almost $3.8 billion, and the first thing my parents did was smile like they had just won a prize. These were the same people who locked me out at 18 with one suitcase and no goodbye. At the will reading, my mother touched my hand and whispered, "Of course we'll manage it for you, sweetheart." My father nodded. Daniel smirked. They thought grief had made me easy to control. Before I dive into the story, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. If you've ever watched family turn love into paperwork, tell me what you would have done, because the page they didn't expect was already waiting. The house I grew up in always smelled like lemon polish, black coffee, and fresh flowers nobody was supposed to touch. My mother kept white roses in the entryway because she said they made the house look peaceful. But peace, in our family, was mostly silence. It was the sound of forks touching plates at dinner while everyone pretended not to notice who got praised and who got corrected. It was my father clearing his throat before he said something cruel in a calm voice. It was my mother smiling at guests, then tightening her hand around my shoulder just hard enough to remind me to behave. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people envied. Big house, private school photos lined up on the hallway wall, Christmas cards where we all wore matching sweaters and smiled like nobody had cried 10 minutes earlier. And then there was Daniel. My older brother didn't have to earn space in that house. He took it naturally, like every room had been built around him. At dinner, Daniel talked over people, and my father called it confidence. He forgot deadlines, and my mother called it pressure. He crashed one business internship after 3 weeks, and somehow everyone decided it showed he had too much vision for small work. When I asked questions, I was difficult. When I stayed quiet, I was cold. When I cried, I was unstable. So I learned to do none of it where they could see. My grandfather, William Carter, noticed anyway. He was my father's father. But they were nothing alike. My father filled rooms with opinions. Grandpa William could sit in a chair by the window, turn the page of a newspaper, and make everybody else suddenly aware of their own noise. He never chased attention. He didn't need to. Power sat on him quietly. When I was little, he used to bring a worn wooden chess clock to Thanksgiving, after dinner, while Daniel showed off and my parents performed for relatives. Grandpa would tap the empty chair across from him. "Your move." "Angelina," he'd say. At first, I thought he just liked the game. Later, I understood he was giving me something no one else did. Time. A place to think before I answered. A reason not to rush just because someone louder wanted me to. The night I turned 18, my parents called me into the kitchen. There was no cake on the counter, no card, just my father's folded hands and my mother's careful face. "You're an adult now," my father said. "It's time you learn what the real world costs." Daniel was upstairs, still on their phone plan, still driving the car they bought him, still spending their money like air. I packed one suitcase. My mother watched from the hallway. My father didn't even stand. And when the front door clicked shut behind me, I thought that was the moment I lost my family. I didn't know my grandfather had just started keeping score. Grandpa William died on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the sky looked dirty and the whole world felt like it had forgotten how to breathe. I found out in the parking lot behind the grocery store where I had stopped for coffee before work. The cup was still warm in my hand when his attorney called. I remember the smell of burnt espresso, the squeak of someone pushing a cart past my car, and the way my knees went loose before I even heard the words. "Angelina," he said gently. "I'm sorry." After that, everything came in pieces. The funeral, the black dress, the quiet church. My father standing near the front like grief was a business meeting he had prepared for. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that stayed perfectly dry. Daniel checked his watch twice. Nobody asked if I was okay. 3 days later, we met at the estate attorney's office downtown. It was on the upper floor of a glass building, the kind with silent elevators and carpet so thick your footsteps disappeared. I wore the same black coat I had worn to the funeral. My hands were cold inside my sleeves. My parents were already there. My mother looked up and gave me that soft, practiced smile. The one she used at charity dinners, the one that made strangers think she had a warm heart. "Angelina," she said. "We're so glad you came," as if I had almost skipped my own grandfather's will reading. My father stood beside her, calm and polished, his silver cufflinks catching the overhead light. Daniel leaned back in his chair, one ankle resting over his knee, looking around the conference room like he was deciding where his nameplate would go. The attorney began reading. At first, it was all formal language: properties, holdings, trust accounts, shares. The words stacked up until they stopped sounding real. Then he said my name. The entire estate, valued at nearly $3.8 billion, was left to me. For 1 second. Nobody moved. Then my mother smiled, not with pride, with relief. My father's shoulders loosened. Daniel let out a quiet laugh through his nose. My mother reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Of course we'll manage it for you." "Sweetheart," she whispered. My father nodded like it had already been decided. "An estate this size needs experience." Daniel smirked. "You can barely handle rent." And right there. I understood. They hadn't come back for me. They had come back for access. The attorney cleared his throat. "I'm not finished," he said. Then he turned to the next page. The room changed so fast I could almost hear it. My mother's hand slipped off mine. My father stopped breathing through his nose. Daniel sat forward, his smirk still on his face but weaker now, like someone had drawn it there and forgotten to finish. The attorney read slowly. Grandpa William had written that no immediate family member could manage, direct, restrict, pressure, or speak on my behalf regarding the estate. Not my father, not my mother, not Daniel. No temporary arrangement, no family oversight, no quiet signatures pushed across a kitchen table. And then came the part that made my father's face go red. They each had a small conditional benefit. Not billions, not control. Just enough to prove whether they could respect one boundary. If they tried to interfere, they would lose it. My mother made a soft sound. William must have been confused. The attorney looked at her over his glasses. He was very clear. My father stood so abruptly his chair scraped the carpet. "This is absurd. She is not prepared for this." I wanted to say something sharp. I wanted to remind him I had been prepared for hunger, rent, car trouble, cheap winter coats, and birthdays alone because he had decided 18 was old enough to survive without him. But I said nothing. Grandpa had taught me that silence could make careless people talk, and they did. The calls started that night. My mother left voicemails full of trembling concern. My father sent long emails about responsibility and protecting the Carter name. Daniel texted me one sentence: "Don't get comfortable, this is temporary." I sat at my small kitchen table with a mug of cold tea and saved everything: emails, messages, payments, bills. Requests sent to financial offices without my permission. Nothing dramatic, nothing stolen, nothing twisted. Just their own words, lined up like footprints in wet cement. The next morning, I met with an attorney my grandfather had once trusted. Her office smelled like paper, coffee, and rain-soaked wool coats. She listened without interrupting, then slid the documents back toward me. "They can't take control of your life just because they don't like that you have one," she said. My throat tightened. For the first time, revenge did not feel like fire. It felt like a locked door, a clean boundary, a pen waiting above the right page. When my parents filed their petition 2 weeks later, they thought they were dragging me into court. They had no idea I was already waiting there. The courthouse looked too ordinary for what it was about to take from them. No storm, no reporters, just wet sidewalks, a security line, and the smell of burnt coffee near the entrance. My attorney, Mary Ann, walked beside me with one thin folder. "Let them talk first," she said. I nodded. Grandpa William had taught me that before any judge entered the room. Never interrupt people who believe they are winning. They will show you what they came for. My parents were already seated. My mother wore pale blue, soft enough to look wounded. A folded tissue rested in her hand, dry and perfect. My father sat beside her in a dark suit, jaw set, like this was a boardroom and I was a bad investment he intended to correct. Daniel sat behind them, He didn't smirk today. He watched me like I had locked him out of a house he still believed was his. When the judge entered, the room rose. The air vent hummed above us. Someone's bracelet clicked. I could hear every small sound because my family had trained me to survive in silence. My father's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, this is not about greed. It is about protection. There it was, the same old poison, poured into a cleaner glass. He said I had inherited nearly $3.8 billion. He said I had no experience managing wealth at that scale. He said I had a difficult emotional history with my family. He said I had lived in rentals, worked ordinary jobs, and made decisions without proper guidance. Some of it was true. That was what made it cruel. They were using the life they forced me into as evidence that I could not be trusted with the life my grandfather left me. Then my father stood. He buttoned his jacket and walked forward with the calm confidence of a man who had never had to beg for permission. Why are you seeking temporary oversight of your daughter's estate? His attorney asked. My father sighed like the weight of loving me had nearly crushed him. Because Angelina has always been sensitive, he said. She takes things personally. After she left home, she struggled. We are only trying to make sure grief and inexperience don't destroy what my father built. After she left home, not after we cut her off. Not after we watched her walk out with one suitcase. My mother dabbed her dry tissue beneath one eye. I just want my daughter safe, she whispered. She thinks we're against her, but we're family. That almost broke me. Not because I believed her, because once, I would have given anything for that sentence to be true. Daniel leaned forward, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. This isn't a checking account, he said. It's an empire. She doesn't know what she's doing. The judge looked at him over her glasses. And you do? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it, for the first time. My father's posture shifted. Then Marianne stood. She did not raise her voice. She placed the folder on the lectern and opened it slowly. Your Honor. The petitioners call this concern. The documents show preparation for control. My father turned sharply. Marianne began with his email, sent 2 days after the will reading, calling the estate a family-controlled asset before he had any authority over it. Then came my mother's messages, soft on the surface, each one pushing the same pressure. You're overwhelmed. Don't decide alone. Let your father handle the structure. My mother's face tightened by inches. I knew that look. It was the look she wore when charm stopped working. Then Marianne read Daniel's text. Don't get comfortable. This is temporary. The courtroom went still. Daniel leaned back like the words had struck him. Marianne moved on. Requests sent to financial offices without my permission. Payments rounded and marked for review. Bills grouped into categories my father had no right to create. No account details, no addresses, just the pattern. They had not been protecting me. They had been building a cage and calling it management. Finally. Marianne lifted Grandpa William's will. Mr. Carter anticipated this exact conduct. She said, the will states that no immediate family member may manage, direct, restrict, pressure, or speak on behalf of Angelina Carter regarding the estate. Any attempt to interfere terminates the conditional benefits left to these petitioners. My mother made a small sound. My father whispered to his attorney. The judge took the document and read in silence. Those seconds felt longer than the years I had spent trying to prove I was not weak. Then she looked at my father. Did your daughter ask you to manage her estate? He blinked. Your Honor, it's more complicated than that. Did she ask you? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The whole story collapsed right there. Not protection. Permission he never had. The judge turned to my mother. Did Angelina authorize you to pressure her into signing management papers? My mother clutched her tissue. I'm her mother. That was not my question. The silence that followed did not belong to my family. For once. It did not trap me. It protected me. Then the judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood. And for 1 second, I was 18 again, under the porch light with a suitcase in my hand, waiting for someone to call me back. Nobody had, so I spoke. You told me I was old enough to survive alone when I was 18, I said. You called it a lesson. I learned rent. I learned hunger. I learned how to work after sleeping on a couch. Now that I have something you want, suddenly I'm too fragile to make decisions. My father stared at the table. I'm not asking the court to punish them because they hurt me, I said. I'm asking the court to stop them from using the pain they caused as proof that I'm broken. My mother covered her mouth. Daniel looked away. My father had no command in his eyes, only fear. The judge denied the petition. My parents were ordered to stop contacting financial institutions on my behalf. They could not pressure me to sign management papers. Their interference had triggered my grandfather's clause, ending their conditional benefits. Any further attempt could bring legal consequences. The ruling sounded calm, almost plain, but it shattered them. My mother sank into her chair. My father's face went gray. Daniel whispered, "This is insane," but nobody answered him. As I walked out, my mother called my name. "Angelina, we were only trying to protect you." I stopped, but I didn't turn back fully. For years, I had wanted her to sound sorry, now that she sounded small. All I felt was clarity. "No," I said, "you were trying to own me." And this time, when I walked away, the door did not close behind me. It opened. After court, people expected me to celebrate. They expected headlines, parties, some dramatic picture of me stepping out of a black car like money had turned me into someone new. But that afternoon, I drove to Grandpa Williams' house alone. The place still smelled like cedar, old books, and the faint peppermint tea he used to drink at night. His chessboard was still by the window. 2 pieces sat in the middle, frozen in a game we would never finish. I picked up the queen. The wood was smooth from years of his fingers. For the first time, I understood what he had really left me, not just an estate, a shield. My parents lost their conditional benefits. Daniel lost his too. The court didn't need to shout to make it final. One ruling, a few signatures, and the door they had tried to force open was sealed. The consequences came quietly after that. My father's business partners stopped laughing at his jokes so quickly. Calls got shorter. Invitations became maybe next time. People in our city knew enough to understand what he had tried to do. And reputation, once cracked, does not break loudly. It leaks. My mother's social world changed too. At charity lunches, women who used to lean close to hear her stories now touched her arm politely and walked away. Her perfect mother image did not survive the record of what she had done. Daniel took it worst. Without my parents' certainty behind him, he looked smaller. Opportunities he once assumed would be handed to him disappeared. He called once from an unknown number. "You ruined us," he said. "No," I told him. "You counted on owning something that was never yours." Then I hung up. I didn't use the money to punish them. I didn't buy revenge. I didn't need to. I hired independent advisors. I asked questions until I understood the answers. I signed slowly. I kept Grandpa's chessboard in my office as a reminder that power without patience becomes a trap. And then I did the one thing my family never expected. I used part of the estate to fund legal support for young adults cut off by their families and older people pressured by relatives for money, because I knew what it felt like when someone called control love, and I knew what it felt like to finally be believed. Months later, I drove past my parents' house with Grandpa Williams' chessboard wrapped in a soft blanket on the passenger seat. The windows were bright, but they didn't pull me back anymore. I kept driving. That was when I finally understood it. Real love doesn't need control to prove it exists, and family doesn't get to turn betrayal into concern just because money is involved. If you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you, share your story in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.